Hello. Welcome to Georgia State University Perimeter College. We are in the Marvin Cole Auditorium here with Michael Boatwright. He's a photographer, and we are going to be here discussing the Dark Houses Atlanta project. My name is Sally Robertson. I'm the professor of theater here, and welcome. We're glad to have you. This is all very new for us, but it's kind of exciting to be able to welcome you into our home via your home. And first of all, I did want to remind everyone there is a chat feature. Please drop in your questions and we'll get to as many of them as we can today. And the photography that you saw, if you checked in a little early, you probably saw Michael's photographs go by. That will also repeat after the interview today. And there will also be a link dropped in a little bit later where you can access all the photographs and all our other 2 galleries. We have 3 in total that are open now. If you want to see them online, they will be accessible. You're also welcome to come down to the Clarkston campus where we are located with your mask and come and see in person the wonderful art that we have in our 3 galleries. We would love to have you. It's very quiet here on campus, and people are being very good about wearing masks, so we definitely want you to come down and be one of those people if you feel that you'd like to see them in person. And if not, you'll check out the link later online. So we are here to talk about a really interesting project about photographing the dark theaters in Atlanta. A little bit of background. This is part of the Atlanta Celebrates Photography Festival. We always enjoy partnering with ACP, and this year is no different. Michael Boatwright is a photographer here in Atlanta, and he's done something pretty cool. As everybody knows, in March we all went into our houses and didn't come out for a while. This is true of theaters, live music venues, cinemas. Everyone was put into lockdown, and around the world theaters went dark. Thousands upon thousands of theater workers have not been working since March. Theaters have not opened yet. A few brave theaters have been trying some interesting experiments. Synchronicity Theater is one of them, of getting people back in the theater live, as well as doing what most theaters are doing, which is internet Zoom, live stream, something theater. And it's a little different for all of us. In July, Michael had this idea to focus on the economic impact of all of these theaters being closed. And he decided to photograph them in situ, meaning whatever was on the stage is on the stage. If you were in the middle of a show, I'm going to photograph it. If you were in the middle of a break, I'm going to photograph it. And that's what is so moving about his photographs. And it really does bring attention to the economic, the social issues of what's been going on with the hundreds of thousands of workers, not just here in Atlanta, but that is what we are here to focus on, but around the world. So I wanted to get together with Michael and ask him a few questions that I had when I look at the photographs. I am a theater person, and I've been doing this for a long time, and in and around Atlanta, and so I have a few questions for him. And welcome, Michael. We're so glad to have you with us today. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Sally. Good afternoon.
Yeah. So, first of all, I really do want to know what your usual artistic focus is, because I don't think it's taking pictures of dark theaters. And after you finish with that, tell us, what really got you into this creative mind of, I want to photograph empty spaces?
Wow. Well, I'm a portrait photographer by trade. Now, that's my business. I primarily focus on the theater, music, theater, dance. I have been a professional photographer. I've had a studio for 6.5 years. I was in corporate America for 37 years, which paid for my photography habit. But the longer that I was in corporate America, the less thrilling that was. And when I was a third level manager in AT&T and they got rid of my entire division, I think they ended up laying off 3,500 people, and I was one of the first to go. And when they said, well, your position's gone, I was like, thank you. My boss was probably more upset than I was, because for me it was the opportunity to really focus on what I love to do. I used to tell people, let the beauty you love be what you do. It's a quote from Rumi. But I wasn't doing that myself. I was doing other stuff and spending about the same amount of time on my other career of photography. But I've been in photography for well over 50 years now, and it's a passion. And so I discovered that the wonderful thing about doing portrait photography in particular is that, or any kind of photography involving people, is that you actually have to engage with people. You can take a picture of a tree, but it's never going to tell you, you don't have to ask it for a model release. And it's never going to tell you, no, you can't take its picture. So there's this thing that was missing. And when I first started photographing people, I was just like photographing people on the street, and it was very voyeuristic and really stagnant. Now I've discovered that there's a creative process that takes two people at least to make happen. It takes the photographer and the subject, and if you don't have both, you don't have anything. Well, guess what? Portrait photography is kind of in-person portrait photography's suffered just like the industry that I happen to love to photograph, because it happens to be my passion.
So you had that realization, oh, I can't do what I do, therefore there are others that can't do what they need to do.
Yeah, in a sense. I mean, obviously, when the bottom fell out of everything, and the bottom fell out of the photography business the same time it fell out on theaters.
Wow.
It's interesting. I was in a class, professional class, the week ending March 13th, March 12th, 13th, whatever that last day, Friday the 13th, I think it was. And my friends, my professional photographer friends who are like portrait photographers for schools, one after the other. Well, there goes another contract. They get a message. Whoop, there goes another contract. And we all collectively watched the bottom fall out of the photography business. At the same time, the theaters were trying, at that point, theaters were separating people 6 feet, trying to have half the theater full, all kinds of experiments just to try to be safe. And somewhere right around that same time, everything shut down. Everything shut down. Yeah. But for me, this whole thing started because as a response to what was going on in my world. And also as a way of kind of keeping in practice, keeping your skills honed. I know in May I did some portraits for families around the neighborhood, and I'd be out in the front yard and they'd be on the porch, and we'd make some nice portraits, and it was kind of fun. But it wasn't all that socially fulfilling. And in May, June timeframe was all the social unrest and and I knew a lot of the photographers. I knew the photographer who made the seminal photograph of the Atlanta police car burning. That was on the front page of the New York Times. And I knew the guy by his byline, but I knew it was his photograph before I saw the byline. It was a friend of mine. And yet I knew, I'm 61 years old, and it just didn't seem to me to be wandering around in the streets of downtown Atlanta, schlepping a lot of equipment around with the virus floating around everywhere. It just didn't seem practical as a thing that I should be doing. So I left that to others. But I had some kind of what could I do? And this came to me. I honor my studio space every day when I come into it with a meditation. I meditate in the studio, and it came to me clear as a Tibetan bell. Go photograph the ghost lights, and then that evolved into the empty theaters as a way of actually showing that, hey, this is a visceral representation. This is a manifestation of what is the impact, the economic and pandemic impacts, because the impact is both economic and the disease itself. Yeah. We can't socialize, but also people don't have the disposable income to be entertained.
And the thing that I think a lot of people miss, those of us in the industry know, we are out of work if we're an artist. The theaters are closed down, but what I'm hearing now is audience, people who are used to going to the theater, there's a mental health part of that because we don't have that audience connection anymore with the audience connecting to the artists.
That's correct.
And you mentioned something which is my next question is, can you tell us briefly about the tradition of the ghost light?
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. This is it's a fun tradition actually, and I was excited that when I walked into the Cole here and there was a ghost light. The ghost light is a tradition in the theater. It has a practical application. There's the apron here on the theater behind us, which is where it drops off into the orchestra pit below, or the orchestra or the seats. And if it's in the dark, you run a risk of breaking your neck walking off the edge of the apron. So there's a practical aspect of the light, having a light burning. And in a lot of theaters today, that's just simply the work lights that they operate under. There's no longer the ghost light itself. But tradition in theater lore is that the ghost light is left burning so that the ghosts will see the light on the stage and will have a place to perform, and they won't wreak havoc throughout the rest of the theater. I think it's a pretty good tradition because, as we all know, things can go bump in the night.
They can, and most theaters seem to have a resident ghost.
Yes, they do.
So, yes. Can you tell us what is the first theater you photographed on this journey?
So the very first theater that I photographed was the First Center. The first theater was the first theater.
The first.
And actually, it would have been, I've been the photographer for Dramatech Theater now for over 6 years, since 2014. I've photographed over 40 productions. And when I say production, photograph a production, basically that's doing the archival photography. Mm-hmm. One of the things I've learned is that photocall is just stale for a theater. Photocall is when you line the actors up on stage, you say, okay, take a certain blocking in a position and pretend like you're performing and snap a picture of it. And then they publish those in the newspaper or whatever they go to. That's kind of stale to me. I like to catch the actors interacting with each other. I like to catch those seminal moments. So I photograph productions. Usually it's the preview production because that's when everybody's in full tech. And you've got all the costumes and the makeup and the hair and the lines are completely rehearsed and is basically ready to go. And so you get a pretty good run. In fact, sometimes I've had better previews than opening nights. And sometimes
Less jitters.
Well, and the opposite is true. And I have observed that if you have a terrible preview, you almost always have a great opening night.
That is one of our
lore,
our myths.
Also.
Yes. Yes.
But the First Center and Dramatech are both in the First Center for the Arts at Georgia Tech. And the Dramatech is in the Dean Dole Black Box Theater, which is a wonderful, wonderful black box theater. In sort of essentially the basement, sort of off the backstage of the First Center. But I knew that we knew that the Dramatech and my dear friend Melissa Fulger, who has been my guiding light through this whole project, was there for me so that we didn't have to worry about getting folks to switch on the lights or open the doors or whatever. Which is really, when you think about it, some of these theaters, people hadn't been in the theaters. If I were to, a lot of the theaters I would go into, I did the majority of the work in July and August. And in many cases, people had not been in the building since mid-March. And that's tragic. Or had just gone to make sure that everything was okay, but they really hadn't done any work. Lots of the stages were just how they left them. Wow. Just how they left them.
Wow.
It is. It's eerie.
My question, the next question actually, he did not see my questions ahead
No,
of
I
time,
didn't.
but he's leading into them very well. Because I read one of the recent interviews you did about the theaters were empty and lonely.
Uh-huh.
And as a theater person, I get that very intensely, especially looking at your photographs. But I was wondering what other thoughts and feelings you got when you were in the theater, because I always had the feeling that theaters are alive in their own way.
Yes.
And not having people in them with their emotions and energy and excitement. What else did you pick up on and that you feel like your photographs share with us?
Well, one of the first things is obviously just that the simple fact is that theaters are acoustically designed to project the sound from the stage to the audience and not let the outside world in. You don't really want to have the sound of fire engines going by disturb the performance. Mm-hmm. So it is very quiet. I would usually have somebody let me in, and we usually come in sometimes we come in through the stage door, but more often than not we would come in through the regular lobby door. And when those doors close behind you, and I wanted the doors closed because I didn't want that extra light coming in. Originally, the original aesthetic was just the ghost light. It turns out only about a third of the theaters have a ghost light. So the first thing that hits you is the overwhelming quiet. It's almost like a deafness in a sense. It's just like, I can remember times when I was using very long exposures to get very sharp images and very low light. And so I would have to count, and I would count. I mean, the camera is counting down the 30 seconds that it would take for the shutter to be open, but I'd kind of like to know when it's about to happen. So I would count in my head, 1, 1,000, 1, 1,002. And as I'm counting quietly, I would hear the blood rushing behind my ears. You can hear the sound of your own pulse. That's eerie. That's very eerie. Beyond that, there is a sense that you are someplace where nobody else is. I mean, there may be 1 or 2 other people in the entire building. In other places, there were more going on, but in some of the theaters, there was literally. There's also, because no one's been in the space for a while, there's a musty smell that you start to sense. The light that's in the theaters is, I mean, it was whatever is there, and sometimes it's just the ghost light, but it casts a very, very strange shadows throughout the theater. And there's also it's almost mysterious, because it's like, how would I say it? You wonder, what all was going on. I mean, you notice, because I've been in the theater a lot, there is a busyness that's always going on, and it's like, wait a second, everything's, where'd it go? Where did it go? Right? And then you start to think about the people who aren't performing and the people who aren't working. I mean, it hits you. There was more than once that I had tears in my eyes. Sometimes it was tears of just the sheer beauty of the space. Atlanta's very blessed that we have a lot of theater. One of the things I love most about Atlanta is a lot of theater, and a lot of very beautiful theaters. And some of these spaces are just overwhelmingly beautiful. This building, this is a beautiful theater, and if you look at the photographs, and people are saying, "Oh, but your pictures are so breaking," I'm like, talk to the architect, right?
Yeah.
All I did was open the shutter.
Nice. That's nice. One of the things, it's interesting, I notice when I look at your photos, it's almost like they have an illustrative quality to them. And I didn't know if you used a special filter, or if it's that aperture opening, I don't know if those are the same, but, is there something special you do?
Well, so like I said, first of all, I originally started with the aesthetic that I was only going to use the ghost lights, and that I had to toss that out pretty quickly because it just didn't work.
Yeah.
Starting with the first theater, it didn't have a ghost light. So we dragged the ghost light from Dramatech over to the first theater so that we'd have a ghost light. I turned it because the Dramatech has 2 bulbs, so I turned it so you only saw one of the bulbs lined up. Did that on purpose. I intentionally used a very narrow aperture, usually f11 or f16 for photography people, so that I could I knew I'm standing in the back of the theater and I want to get everything sharp. So I also used primarily a wide-angle lens so that I could capture the broad expanse. So those were the technical aspects of making the exposure, which then necessitated. I also wanted to have a low ISO so that I wouldn't have noise in the images, knowing that it would be very dark. Shooting in the theater, a little bit about shooting in the dark. So and you have to deal with harsh lighting, and I would not move much. I wouldn't change much lighting. Sometimes I would have them bring up the house lights a little bit, because I realized early on part of the story was seeing the empty seats. And when you just have the ghost light on stage, you don't really see that because it doesn't cast out into the seats. Beyond that, I did very little technical work on the developing of the photographs. Oftentimes, about the only thing that I would change coming out of the camera was I would do a perspective correction so that the lines are straight, so they look right. I would do a little bit of cropping for the best, if there's the proscenium sometimes is not so attractive at the very top, but sometimes it is very attractive at the very top. It depends on the theater, right? So you have to make a value judgment on that. But beyond that, pretty much they came out of the camera as almost like the ghosts of the theater wanted the story to be told.
Nice.
It really felt that way. I was like, I can't believe this. I can't believe they look like this.
They definitely have a unique quality to them that, we were looking at them the other day, and it's just like, this is so interesting. He's done something without Photoshop, without any changes. It's like, there's something about it.
Yeah, I didn't add anything or subtract things other than general cropping. I was aware that part of what I wanted to do with these images was to have them published. And they have been published in a couple of newspapers, the AJC, Cartersville, because a couple of the theaters were up in Cartersville, and different newspapers, different publishing agents have different journalistic standards for photography. So I didn't want to put things in that weren't there or take things out that weren't there.
Nice, thank you. So I know we have a couple of questions in the chat.
Michael, were there any theaters that you really wanted to get into that you weren't able to access for one reason or another?
Yeah, there were actually. There were several theaters that I didn't think I would be able to get into at first. I thought I thought that the Fox Theater was going to be a challenge, and it turned out that the folks at the Fox are the greatest. The technical staff and the marketing staff are all fantastic, and they welcomed me with open arms. I had done some work in the theater the year before. I had photographed the organist Ken Double, so I had made some very pretty photos of the Fox Theater. Some other theaters, I won't mention one by name, but it's up sort of at 75 and 285. I made some wonderful photographs, but their board decided that they didn't want to have them published. So, which was unfortunate, which is why I photographed 33 theaters, but I've only published 31. One of the things that's important as a professional photographer is to be aware that there are going to be other uses of these things, and that that I needed to go ahead and have releases ahead of time so that I would have permission to use them. Not that I had any ulterior motive. I really didn't. In fact, this project has cost me money. I haven't made anything off of it. But I did want to have the protection both for myself and my business as well as for the theaters. And I was aware of one other painful fact, which was that one of the reasons I rushed so quickly to get so many done so fast was that I wanted to make sure that I got them before the theaters went out of business, and sadly a couple have.
Yeah.
At least one has packed up everything and put it in storage. Some others are letting some of their important people go, which is very painful, and that means that the theater may have a struggle coming back.
Yep.
And I wanted to get that documentation in place so that everything was covered. We had what we have is a package of a historical record at this point that I wanted to be sure was protectable because it matters.
It does.
It matters a lot.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
What's your favorite element to photograph when you go into the theater?
You probably already know the
I've
answer to this
guessed.
if you looked at all online. I have this thing about line sets.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I absolutely look at line sets, and if you can't pan the camera, but it's right over here.
We do have, there's some you took several photographs, I
I
noticed,
did
of the different fly systems.
because
Yes.
the line set here at the Cole is most wonderful, and the stairwell that goes up. What I didn't realize, and your staff told me, was that how much higher the Alliance Theater's whole the whole aerial space of the Alliance is about twice the space of in here. And I didn't even realize because I was so overwhelmed by the line set at the Alliance because it is just amazing. That the spiral staircase had kind of disappeared in because of the overwhelming size. But there it is. It's like
Oh, wow.
what, a 40-foot staircase, I think, that goes all the way up.
Ours seems huge, but I know it's not compared to that.
For folks who don't know what a line set is, because there are people who don't get turned on by line sets like I do. A line set, or also some people call it a fly set, or fly lines. In the theater here, you have poles that go across that lights are clamped onto. You've got curtains and drapes, and you've got drapes coming off for the wings. You've got the curtain, the main curtain. You may have a fire curtain. You know, you have a whole series of things in the structure of the theater that the public never sees. When you come in, the public never sees.
It's how we create the magic part of it.
Yeah.
Because we can bring in set pieces as long as they're a certain width. Yes, it's wonderful.
And I mean, and, you know, and that goes back, I mean, that's what, 2,500 years of history in building that technical design, right? Yeah. All the way back to the Greeks.
Yeah.
But the line set are the ropes that are on weights, and they have brakes so that they can safely bring the pieces of equipment up and down in the theater.
It's part of our magic. Yes, it is our
Part
history.
of the magic.
I wondered if that was it when I saw so many photographs of that. So
Yeah, I really love line sets. There's just something about the structure and the shape and the form that really turns me on.
I like that. Can you tell us, Michael, is there anything that these photos that you took that illuminate the spaces themselves outside of the economic and the pandemic and all of these issues? Is there anything that and it could be activism, it could be a change that you're after, but was there anything about your photographs that you want to talk about the illuminating of, I mean, it could just be the art. I don't know. I feel like there was something in them besides, you know, pay attention, this is an important issue, which it is, it's hugely important, but is there anything to illuminate about the spaces themselves even?
Wow. Well, one thing that was interesting thought to me, I'd been in the Fox Theater behind the scenes several times before on a variety of photo shoots. I was an assistant to a dance photographer, Richard Calmes, who back in 2014 we photographed the Ailey Company, Alden Ailey Company, and we had the run of the theater. So I was familiar with the Fox. And I had seen the Ghost Light. And the Ghost Light in the Fox is an immense structure. It's something like 8 feet tall.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, if you stand under, or at least it feels that way when you stand next to it, because it is just very large.
I've seen it from the audience, but I've not seen it.
Well, you know, I had realized, because I'd been to many productions in the Fox, that I doubt very many people had ever actually seen the Ghost Light at the Fox. So to me, that's illuminating. I think there's something kind of cool. I love what the Horizon Theater does, where they invite, Jeff Idler told me how they invite their patrons into the theater during Tech Week to show them how the sauce is made.
Yep.
And people don't get to see how the sauce of theater is made because it's magic and you don't want to show the magic tricks. But on the other hand, there's something fascinating about what goes on in the theater and makes the story told. So there's those things too. And then there's one other thing that I sort of alluded to before. And I don't know what originally made me realize it, but it was about the seats, seeing the house seats. I mean, when you talk about a dark house, the house is really out here.
Right.
And a dark house is actually a technical term in the theater, which means the house is dark. It doesn't mean nobody's in the theater. There's always usually people in the theater. But it means that the house is dark because there are no patrons here, no paying customers. But I also knew that not having paying customers was part of the story. And so the first theater I went to, I shot looking back, out here, looking back so you saw the empty seats. What was interesting was I also early on started asking everybody, how many seats are in your theater? For one thing, that helped me get an idea of how big it was and how much time it was going to take me to do the work. But how big was the theater? Well, I recorded those info. And what I discovered was that just in the 33 theaters that I photographed, there's over 15,000 seats that are empty in Atlanta for an entire season. And if you think about a season of a theater for a typical house, that's at least 6 shows a year. Often 6 runs a week for typically 4 to 5 weeks. If you take that math out and you figure, let's say an average of $30 a seat, which is low when you consider some of the theaters and high when you consider some of the others, that I just extrapolated out just the ticket sales itself for 15,000 seats was somewhere between $65 and $80 million. And when you realize that the ticket price is only a partial part of the overall cost of production, that all of a sudden becomes a real economic impact. Now that's people, that's not just, well, you know, that's people are paying for entertainment. No, that's people that are not spending money at the grocery store. That's money not being spent at Home Depot for, set construction. That's a lot, that's a big economic impact. And it's one that I don't think most people realize.
I think you're right, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I know there's been several studies recently. The economic impact of the arts in Atlanta is in the billions. And when you shut down all of our theaters, what does that do to the entire area? And it is heartbreaking to think about. Individually, we know how that impacts our friends and our colleagues, but it impacts the entire region.
So there's estimates now, economists say that in the United States right now there's something in the neighborhood, and who knows, I mean the measurements, it's hard to measure these days, but measurements of approximately 30 million people out of work in the United States. Half of those people, 15.5 million of them, are in the entertainment industry, either film, theater, or commercial work.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
That's, yep. Do we have any more questions over there? We're good. All right. I guess my last question, really the important one, is do you have any advice for students or people in general who might be interested in photography as something they want to do either for profit or fun or just because they were inspired?
Well, I think that there's probably a myth that says I have a camera and therefore I just got a camera, or even worse, you know, you're out in the field shooting and somebody says, oh, you must be a really good photographer, you've got an expensive camera, and all that means is you got a telephoto lens on it.
Right.
I think that if I were to give advice to people starting out in photography right now, I think it's going to have to, flexibility is probably the number one quality to have as a photographer. Photography is an art form, and like any other art form, we see something that moves us, and we want to share that feeling with others, and that's why that's why we're artists.
Right.
And we learn technique so that we can effectively take what we see and convey that to the people that are going to view our final product. And all too often in the industry today, we focus on technique and we don't focus enough on art. And that's probably the biggest challenge for me personally, as much as anything else, because I'm a technician, I'm a tech guy. My dad taught me photography when I was a teenager, and or early teens, and I was in a family of artists. My mom was a painter, my sister's a working artist today, my aunt could legally authenticate a Dutch master's painting.
Wow.
She had studied at the Sorbonne. Dad and I were photographers. And today I still love the process. I just love the process, the end-to-end making stuff. Making stuff's fun, right?
Yeah.
But there's a thing where, you know, the idea to take and to convey to the feeling, which I've heard from you and I've heard from many others about, oh my gosh, the hauntingness of your photos. I feel really grateful that people say that. I mean, it's sad and it's painful, but I also feel grateful because it means I was successful as an artist, because that's the feeling I felt. And if I can convey that feeling through my technique, then I'm successful as an artist. And I think that for folks getting started now, you need to really make sure that that's where your heart is. If you want to be rich, get rich quick, go into stocks and bonds. Don't go into photography. If you want, of course, you know, there's the old joke that says, you know, where does a Broadway performer do? What does a Broadway performer do during the day? They wait tables. Right? Well, it's the same thing is true about photography, and particularly photography that's one-on-one. But the other cool thing about photography is there's such a wide range of things that can be done. And just because we now have a cell phone in our pocket that we can call ourselves a photographer with, doesn't mean that it does that there's not a place for photographers in the world today. So I encourage them, and in fact, I'm looking forward to meeting with some photography students after this talk tonight.
Yeah,
So
I know you get to talk with one of our photography classes. That's
Yeah.
very exciting for them.
I'm very
Thank you for
excited
doing
about that myself. I always love to talk to new photographers because they are the lifeblood of the industry. And they make us old guys have to they challenge us.
Yep.
They make us take a look at, and what am I stuck in? What I've been doing the same thing for 30 years. Should I keep? No. Well, no. Things have. If anything, if everybody hates 2020, but if there's anything 2020, it's taught us is we have to change.
Change is inevitable.
Change is inevitable.
It is.
So,
And it's coming, hopefully things will change for the better. And your work, I think, has helped others who aren't directly related to this industry see some of the changes that are happening, especially with the artists. And I appreciate that as an artist, and I know others do too. And as sad as it is sometimes to look at the photos, it's also, I get a sense of thank goodness that I get to see this in your eyes, and I do appreciate that. So thank you.
thank you very much.
That's it for my questions, and I guess we've been pretty quiet in the chat for the last minute or two. So we'll say thank you, Michael, so much.
you.
Thank you for your art. Thank you for your chat today. And if you want to come down to the Clarkston campus of Georgia State University and see Michael's photographs in person, and it is well worth the trip, please do come down. You can also see them online in the gallery link, as well as our other two wonderful exhibits. And we are here. We're going to be having other events, safe events as well for theater and music, so we look forward to inviting you back for those. Other than that, please enjoy the photographs as they go by once we have finished our interview. And thank you so much for joining us.